welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne, covering for Darren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. If you are asking the question, what is this show all about? We bring you a discussion providing a deeper understanding of the issues and inequities many communities face. From systemic inequalities to pressing social problems, our guests will provide multiple perspectives and insights to help us better understand and address these challenges. We invite you to stay connected with us as the Social Justice Forum starts now. Welcome back. Alabama Supreme Court delivers a groundbreaking verdict, officially acknowledging frozen embryos as legal entities tantamount to children. This landmark decision sparks fresh debate on matters concerning reproductive rights and ethical considerations in medical practice. What implications does this hold for the trajectory of infertility treatments and the vast inventory of frozen embryos housed nationwide? Joining us now is the Assistant Professor of Bioethics at Columbia School of Professional Studies, David N. Hoffman. David, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure to be with you.
Now, before we jump into the topic, I definitely want to learn a little bit more about you. Can you just tell us more about your role at Columbia School of Professional Studies?
Absolutely. I teach in the master's program in bioethics, where we also offer a certificate in bioethics for people who are not ready to commit to a full master's program. And I teach courses on, among other things, law and bioethics, organ transplantation ethics, organizational ethics, and clinical ethics at the end of life.
So this means that you're the perfect person to have this discussion on. So thank you again for joining us. I just want to start off by saying, the recent Alabama Supreme Court ruling classifies embryos as children under state law, and it has sparked a lot of debate. Can you just explain the core of this decision and its potential impact on IVF practices?
Absolutely. This is not a new development in Alabama. It is merely a new application of Alabama law that has existed since 1975. It was in that year that Alabama adopted the Wrongful Death of a Minor Act, and that law said that the death of an embryo could be the subject of a civil lawsuit, that is a lawsuit to collect monetary damages, if the embryo died as a result of somebody else's fault or negligence. That could be a physician in a medical context. It could be the driver of an automobile that injured a pregnant woman, resulting in the loss of the pregnancy. And what the Alabama Supreme Court's decision in the case that is variously referred to as the LePage decision or the Fondy decision, it's the one that just came out recently, is to extend that statute or to interpret that statute to include embryos that exist outside of the female uterus. And that was a question that had not been directly addressed in the statute when it was adopted in 1975. All of these practices were at that point science fiction. And so what we have just recently is the extension of this wrongful death statute, this right to bring a civil claim, to include embryos that are in a woman's uterus, that is headed toward pregnancy and delivery of a newborn child, as well as embryos that are frozen and existing only outside of a woman's body.
Now, what are the potential consequences of this ruling for couples struggling with infertility who rely on IVF for family planning?
First thing everyone should know is that this law only applies in Alabama. So it has no direct legal implications for practices in New York or any other state, though it has certainly generated an enormous amount of discussion around the notion of liability for failure to properly care for frozen embryos and whether the notion of an embryo being frozen should be described using the same words in the English language as an embryo that is implanted in a woman's uterus. So the immediate impact in Alabama is it has IVF practitioners very nervous about their liability concerns. And that generated a response from the Alabama legislature because of the national outcry that the Supreme Court's interpretation of their wrongful death statute was going to have a chilling effect on availability of IVF services. And remember, IVF is for individuals who want to have a baby and can't. And the concern was that the Alabama Supreme Court decision would have a chilling effect on that. So the Alabama legislature hastily passed a law saying that individuals actually engaged in practices of in vitro fertilization would enjoy both civil and criminal immunity from liability. And that was some satisfaction to some practitioners in Alabama. Many others are still concerned about what the scope of the law will be, particularly because the case, the LePage case, involved not the practice of IVF, the actual application of the technique, but rather it involved the negligent security around the frozen embryos. Somebody got into the storage facility, took some of the embryos, caused them to fall to the floor, and ultimately causing them to be non-viable, to not be available for implantation. That begs the question whether the Alabama statute, in response to the Alabama Supreme Court decision, is going to do enough to reassure practitioners of IVF to get involved in the full range of IVF activities. It's important for everyone to understand that right now, what has resumed is the implantation of already retrieved human eggs from the woman's ovaries, the fertilization of those eggs with male sperm, and then the freezing of them. What has resumed is the implantation of those frozen embryos. It remains to be seen whether the individuals who do IVF in Alabama will feel sufficiently comfortable to retrieve additional eggs from women's bodies, fertilize them, freeze them, and use them for future IVF attempts. And that's complicated because invariably, given the technology of IVF, a clinician who's providing IVF services is going to retrieve many more eggs than are needed or that could possibly be implanted. And the status, both the moral status and the legal status of those embryos remains an open question in Alabama.
Now, from a bioethical standpoint, how does this ruling challenge our understanding of human life and personhood, particularly regarding embryos?
It's very interesting. The bioethical question really turns on linguistics, right? What do we want to understand the word person or child to mean? And even what do we want to understand the notion of embryo to mean? Because there's one medically accepted definition that says a fertilized egg is not an embryo in a clinical sense until it is implanted inside of a uterus, because prior to implantation in a uterus, notwithstanding the existence of some new technologies that will dispense with the need for a human female uterus, ectogenesis, but putting that aside, the notion that the word embryo and the notion of a child status being equivalent for an embryo that is frozen to that of an embryo that is implanted in a uterus creates communication and clarity problems that are the heart of the ethical dilemma, because we need to have a means, whatever we want, of describing the implanted embryo in a woman's uterus as being something different than a frozen embryo, which may or may not ever see the inside of anyone's uterus. And the ethical question is, who should decide when a frozen embryo goes inside of either the progenitor's uterus, the person who initiated the creation of the embryo, which may be their biologic material or the biological material of somebody else, but when does the progenitor get to decide this is the time for one or two or more of the frozen embryos to go inside some uterus? And of course, this question of personhood for for embryos getting inside of uteruses begs the question of the parenthood responsibility, right? Because that biologic material belongs to someone, and historically it has been the authority, legally and ethically, of that individual, that person whose biologic material is contained in the embryo, or that person who arranged for the creation of that embryo with perhaps two other people's biologic material. Those individuals have exercised a parenthood right to decide whether those embryos should go into their uterus or anyone else's uterus, and that reality has now been called into question. Because when you assign personhood status to an embryo, frozen embryo, you're begging the question whether the progenitor, the person whose effort created that embryo, whether they have the legal and moral authority to decide when or if that embryo goes into a uterus or not.
Now, we have made it very clear that right now this is just in Alabama. However, do you think this ruling, in Alabama might influence discussions about IVF regulations in New York State?
Frankly, I think it will likely influence action in New York State, not in the manner in which either the Alabama legislature or the Alabama Supreme Court intended. Much of the discussion that has been prompted by the LePage decision of the Alabama Supreme Court has been directed towards strengthening protection for reproductive freedom and access to reproductive technology like IVF. New York, for example, requires that all women have access to IVF services, and there is legislation currently being considered that would facilitate wider access to IVF services for more New Yorkers. So it's really had a galvanizing impact on states like New York that have historically been very supportive of IVF. In fact, our own Senator Kristen Gillibrand has introduced a piece of legislation in Congress to define the ability of individuals, couples, or single individuals to utilize IVF without fear of prosecution for the disposal or the decision not to implant any number of what we can describe as surplus embryos.
Now, more on a nationwide scale, how have healthcare providers, particularly IVF clinics, responded to pretty much everything that's going on in Alabama right now? I'm curious to know, what was the response to this ruling?
The response from the IVF clinical community, the practitioners, the doctors and therapists and technicians who are involved in providing IVF services, has been widely a reaction of great concern, simply because what Alabama did in reinterpreting their own wrongful death statute has raised discussions about taking similar steps in other states. And this is not, the Alabama case is not the beginning of this discussion. This discussion, in some respects, dates back to 1995, and the federal legislation and then litigation over partial birth abortion, which was the first attempt to identify legal protections and interests for an unborn fetus or child. And this has continued up to and including in recent years in states like Arizona that dramatically changed the law in that state with regard to who has control and responsibility for fertilized eggs, embryos, frozen embryos, in the case of divorce. So if anyone were interested, they could look at the case of Torres versus Terrell, which turned the settled law on this country on its head in deciding that the interests of the unimplanted embryos were paramount and subordinated the interests of the male and female progenitors, in this case, the couple that created the embryos with their biologic material, hence use of the term progenitor, and the disposition of those embryos when they decided to get divorced.
Now, I think this is a very interesting situation because, for the most part, this situation usually occurs when people want to have children and they want to have babies. Given your expertise, how do you perceive the intersection of reproductive rights and the pro-life movement in this ruling?
Well, this is a continuum, and we should be very clear about that. Regardless of how any of your viewers feel about IVF, and regardless of how they feel about abortion as a medical procedure, as a social controversy, and as a legal right, this is a continuum of development moving toward recognizing embryos now as early as the stage when they're still frozen, pre-implantation, as being the equivalent of a child who is extrauterine, outside of the uterus, meaning born. And it's all well and good for states to want to legislate on the topic of the moral status and the rights of frozen embryos. But using the term child or person to simultaneously describe the product of a pregnancy that is outside the uterus, where the umbilical cord has been cut, and that human organism is living and breathing on its own. We call that a baby. And using the same terms, person and child, to describe a frozen embryo just creates confusion about what the meaning of those words, person and child, are as we move from a tank full of frozen nitrogen to a living, breathing pink baby. That's intentional on the part of some people who want to use this notion of personhood as a way of undermining the doctrine that women should have the right to control what is done to their bodies. And this is a new controversy that we're going to have to deal with, specifically tied to this notion of a homonym, using a word to describe two different, even if they are related, phenomenon, such as child and person as a homonym being described as a term applied to frozen embryos and living, breathing pink babies.
Well, this is a very intense discussion, but I think it's something that definitely needs to happen. And it's been an ongoing fight in our country for such a long time. But I truly appreciate you, taking the time to come on our show and talk about it and educate our community a little bit more about what's going on, regardless of whatever side the person may fall on. There are some things that are, I guess, just factual in regard to a lot of this. So we truly appreciate you taking the time to kind of educate us and tell us what's going on. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We have to take a quick break. We'll be back after this.
What's up, creative family? Discover your voice with BronxNet community media classes. Are you ready to bring your ideas to life? At BronxNet, we offer television production classes for community members ages 18 and over, empowering you to share your vision with the world. Get certified in field production, in-studio production, and our new exciting addition, podcast production. Once certified, you can create your own show to air on one of our 6 TV channels. It all starts with our free Unleash Your Ideas Masterclass, designed to help you plan your show idea and set you up for success on your production journey. This class is offered at the beginning of each month for your convenience. Our dedicated BronxNet team is here to support, encourage, and uplift you every step of the way. Join us and become a part of the creative force that engages and inspires the Bronx community and beyond. Sign up today and start your media journey with BronxNet. Visit bronxnet.org/education to learn more and register. Let's create something amazing together.
We're gonna start the show right now. This is my favorite part. Ready in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hey, this is Angel, and I am one of the instructors for the in-studio production. Here at BronxNet, we offer classes that can help you elevate, expand, and start your television career. All you have to do is sign up at bronxnet.org/education. For the past 7 years, I have been in various productions, spanning from talk shows, independent films, news reports, art displays, teachings, musical performances, and many more. Ain't that right, Angel? Yeah, you're absolutely right, Angel. There are a lot of creative individuals that we're just waiting to sign up for the class. And if I may, can I also express thank you, Angel. That's all the time we have left. Visit bronxnet.org/education and become a producer by taking the course. The class I offer is also in English, en español y también bilingüe. Nos vemos en la próxima clase.
Welcome back. Despite Mayor Adams commending the NYPD for reducing certain crimes and dubbing New York the safest city in the world, a critical issue remains overlooked. Homicides resulting from intimate partner violence are on the rise, particularly affecting Black and brown women. Shockingly, intimate partner fatalities surged by 29.2% from 2021 to 2022, which is the second largest increase in New York City's intimate partner fatality rates in a decade. Joining us now is the Vice President of Government Affairs of the Urban Resource Institute, Lauren Schuster. Lauren, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Kibin. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Now, I want to delve right into this because this is a very,
Absolutely.
serious topic. And just, from the intro alone, I learned so much. The report released by the NYC Domestic Violence Fatality Review Committee reveals a significant increase of 29.2% in intimate partner fatalities in the one-year period between 2021 to 2022. Can you help us understand the key factors contributing to this alarming rise?
Absolutely. And I think that's the question on the top of everybody's mind right now. Before we dive right into it, I also want to clarify that the increase is even more stark in the Bronx, where DV fatalities have increased by 57% between 2021 and 2022. And in Brooklyn, they've increased by a startling 225%. So it's even worse in both of those two boroughs. And I think everybody is looking for the silver bullet, the main driver of this spike. And I think it's far more complicated than looking to any one cause as the single driver here. I think it would make our work as advocates so much easier if there was one cause that we could point to. Then we could just invest a ton of resources. But I think it's complex and there are myriad issues contributing to this spike. In part, we see that intimate partner violence, it's cyclical. So there are increases that ebb and flow over time. And there's some of that that's contributing to this increase. But if you look through the Fatality Review Committee report, which we have done at length since it's been released, you see that the communities with the highest levels or the highest increases across the city are also the ones that experience or have historically experienced great levels of disinvestment. These are communities that are struggling and have historically struggled to be seen. They are communities with higher overall rates of violence. They are communities with high rates of income inequality. And so we are seeing that a lack of priority in these neighborhoods has perchance driven some of this increase for sure.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, Mayor Adams has praised the NYPD just for crime decreases. But, now that we're kind of looking at it with this lens on it, how would you assess the city's overall safety considering this specific and critical issue?
I think that's a really important question. URI, Urban Resource Institute, we're the largest provider of temporary housing for DV survivors and their families in the entire country. So everything we look at, everything we think about is through the lens of providing and creating safety for our survivors and their families as they are working to rebuild their lives following a domestic violence situation. And so for us, it could be that the entire city is the safest it's ever been. And whether that's true, it's for other people to debate. But for us, the most important thing is that for folks who are experiencing violence at home, the city is not a safe place. In fact, it is less safe than it was in the past, and that's alarming.
Now, I want to touch on the important fact of that Black and brown women are seeing these high numbers at a disproportionate rate compared to other groups and communities of women. What systemic issues or lack of resources might be contributing to this trend?
I mean, I think the report leans right into this right at the outset. It talks about the fact that Black women and Hispanic women are disproportionately impacted by domestic violence and are experiencing higher rates of homicide, domestic violence homicide. And that is a really scary statistic. I think they're, they're, these communities in particular often feel overlooked or invisible. And it is crucial that when we are talking about what is driving domestic violence, that we really focus on the fact that it is these two particular groups that are experiencing the highest rates, the highest increases, and that we include their voices in developing solutions. You know, the Fatality Review Committee report, I think for URI and for many of the advocates and survivors who are working on this, shouldn't be the end point. It should be the beginning of an ongoing conversation. And so the goal for us would be to bring together a task force of sorts with elected officials and city and state agencies, advocates, survivors, community leaders in these hardest hit areas to really research on the ground what's contributing to this alarming increase in the Bronx in particular and citywide, and then to develop solutions that are created, driven, led by the people who are being impacted the most.
And that's so great that you brought that up because I wanted to kind of expand on that a little bit more on how can policy responses be tailored to address the specific needs of these communities. And, you know, what does that actually look like? Because I think a lot of people, they have the idea of like, okay, this is what we need to do, or maybe they'll do the research, but, you know, what is that extra step that's going to make the community feel, you know, honestly, because it's such a sensitive topic, comfortable and open with, you know, kind of dealing with this and talking about it?
I think that's such an important question because we've come a long way in the way that we talk about and approach domestic violence and intimate partner violence, but there's still a significant stigma that exists around this work and about being somebody who has experienced domestic violence as a witness, as a victim, or even as somebody who's caused harm. And so one of the things that URI really focuses on is trying to remove that stigma. We are working from a client-centered, survivor-centered approach. Everything we do is trauma-informed, and the goal is to be culturally responsive, not just competent, but responsive. And in responding to the community, it means that we need to include them in the conversation and let them lead the discussion.
Now, the report indicates a proposed decrease in funding to the sector providing services to survivors of IPV, intimate partner violence, and their families. In light of the rising fatalities, how do you view the potential impact of these cutbacks on the ability to address and prevent intimate partner violence?
I think there are real opportunities to make investments in programming that have the potential to really reduce violence and make communities safer. Here at URI we work with young people to teach them about how to identify the warning signs of intimate partner violence and how to build healthy relationships. We know the research shows that abuse is learned, and that is a very sad thing to think about, but it's also empowering because if it's learned, it could also be unlearned. And if we work with the youth right away in these hardest hit communities, then we really have the ability to sort of change those cycles, to interrupt them, and to recreate them with healthy relationship skills. And so rather than look at the places where we haven't invested, we're really trying to look at the places where we could be investing. And youth violence prevention is one of the key places that we see real opportunity for change.
Now, I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts on the mayor's or the city or just like the overall system's response to this issue, and what actions do you believe should be taken to address the crisis?
I think that's a really important question. Um, so what I would say is we really need to be talking, focusing, highlighting on intimate partner violence and highlighting the fact that there are communities where people don't feel safe when they go home. For me, if I feel unsafe walking through the streets of New York City, I can go home, I can close my door, I can pull down my shades, and I am safe. And that is a privilege that not everybody gets to experience here. And that is something that we really need to center in conversations about public safety. I think there's a lot of talk, um, and this is writ large, not just here in New York, but there's a lot of talk about public safety as a community experience, and that is true. But it's also a family experience, and we're not talking about how families experience or do not experience safety. And again, I think the answer is really letting empowering communities to lead these discussions and then driving investment in solutions that we believe have the potential to make the greatest change. And so that's youth violence prevention. URI has this incredibly innovative program, and there are other organizations who are doing this work, but we work with people who have caused harm. So these are, people who have been, in some cases, convicted of a crime related to domestic violence, and we work with them to help them take accountability for their violent behavior, but also um, to understand what the underpinnings of that violence was. Why did you respond to a stimulus with violence? And in many cases, what we found is that they've experienced trauma themselves. They've experienced violence at home, community violence, you name it. And so addressing that violence, naming it, working through it, and providing people who've caused harm with the tools to navigate stressful or triggering situations has the potential to prevent future harm or at least reduce it. And so it's investing in programs before the violence starts, that we think has the real potential to make the greatest impact.
Now, I want to know, how can the city better collaborate with organizations like your own that are doing the work to ensure that survivors have the support that they need to escape and recover from violent situations? And I ask this because I noticed just throughout life, maybe in college classes, people will say that they will report things, but they don't really get the response. They don't get that encouragement that they need, and that sometimes people will just brush it off. And these are people that are supposed to help them. So how can how can the city better collaborate with organizations like yours to ensure that this doesn't really happen again?
I mean, we can and we do sit around tables and talk about solutions and work through where these communities are and what causes it. But I think your question raises a really important point, and it's that the communities who are the hardest impacted need to feel safe. They need to feel like if they are at risk, if they are in a violent or potentially violent situation, that they can call for help and that help will come. And many of these communities have in many cases, well-placed mistrust of law enforcement and do not feel safe reaching out for help when they are confronting family violence. And so I think for us, it is naming that, it is talking about it, and it is figuring out how to broach that gap, and how to train law enforcement to better respond to domestic violence calls, and how to help communities feel like when they are in this situation that they can reach out for help. It's all about building that trust.
And I love that your organization kind of looks at the intersectionality of the entire situation, because I've learned that, maybe for a Black woman, calling the cops because, she's experiencing IPV could mean that her partner is harmed now. And a lot of women are afraid of that. Same with maybe other places where, maybe they're a family of immigrants and people are afraid that that could, cause harm to the family. So I truly appreciate that your organization is like looking at these different blocks and looking at the entire picture instead of just looking at domestic violence on its own, because I think that's the best way to help people. Can you talk a little bit more about, how your organization kind of looks at some of those things and points out the intersectionality, and and what training goes into that to ensure that people who have the right mind and who want to help kind of look at those situations?
I think these are some of the most important questions, and I'm just so grateful for you to ask them. I think one of the biggest points of intersection that we found outside of race and cultural identity is also housing. I would say that I wouldn't just say it is the case that domestic violence is one of the leading causes, drivers of homelessness in the city. And right now, more than 40% of families who are in the family shelter system for people experiencing homelessness are there because they experience domestic violence. And so this is a really important conversation to be having at a time when conversations about homelessness have really, they're everywhere at this point. And I think we really need to highlight the fact that addressing homelessness means that we are also addressing domestic violence, that if we address one of these issues, we will have an impact on the other one. Housing instability and violence at home go hand in hand.
Now, in your opinion, what role does the media play in raising awareness about intimate partner violence? Because I think that that's really important. Even what we do here is a part of the media, and that's why we want to bring on voices like yours. So can you just talk about, what role do you think the media plays in addressing the issue, and possibly like kind of creating these ideas that we have around domestic and intimate partner violence?
I think it is one of the most critical roles. I think the media has the potential to not simply elevate the issue with the public and with policymakers, but also to reframe the narrative around intimate partner violence. I think a lot of people think that what happens behind the closed doors of somebody's home is their business. And it is not our problem as a community, as a people, to address, and it is. I think that there is still so much stigma around intimate partner violence, and I think that causes so many people who are experiencing violence to stay in a dangerous situation. And I think the media is one of the most incredibly powerful tools that we have to reframe and reshape that narrative and to empower survivors.
Now, can you let everybody know where they can go to learn more information? Maybe they know someone who needs help. What can people do right now to kind of combat this?
So that is a fantastic question. I think two of the most important things are that if you are in a dangerous situation, there is information available to you. So you can visit URI's website. It's URINYC.org. You can also call the New York City hotline, and this is a place where if you are experiencing violence and need somewhere safe to go, you can call and they will help place you in a safe location. And that the national number is 1-800-799-7233.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me and having this discussion and educating our community and doing the necessary work it takes to kind of end the stigma, but also find solutions to help, these very vulnerable communities. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for uplifting this issue. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Likewise. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back after this.
Only 57% of New York City high school students are college ready by their senior year. "55% of high school graduates either have no plans to attend college or are uncertain that they will ever attend. "34% of young adults don't go to college because they can't afford it. Discover what's possible. BronxNet's education programs, internships, and opportunities help engage and inspire Bronx youth and beyond to pursue their passions. Be a part of the BronxNet family. Whether you're interested in our shows, joining a class, or donating to support our mission, visit BronxNet.org to learn more.
Welcome back. For the past 6 remarkable years, Avalah has been a beacon of natural beauty, proudly rooted in the vibrant streets of Brooklyn, New York. More than just a brand, Avalah is a testament to the power of nature, community, and self-care. Joining us now is the CEO and founder of Avalah, Alexzandra Denis. Alexzandra, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Now, can you share with us the inspiration behind founding Avalah?
My mom is from St. Vincent. It's a small island in the Caribbean, and they were very much into all natural ingredients, shea butter, making her own hair oil, cleaning products. If you have a problem, she knew how to solve it with a plant or oil or a butter. And so when I got older, I said, I want to take those all natural ingredients, but make it a luxury. You know, you're grown. I wanted to be a little bit sexy, something that I could wear to corporate America. And then I wanted scents that I could layer and use my fragrances or colognes with that would still give me moisturized skin, vibrant hair. So it was all my mom.
Now, can you just explain, like what it means to kind of add a little bit of your background in the creation of this? It's a business, but you put a lot of yourself in that. So, can you just talk about what that means to you?
My business is all the facets of my life. So some of it's from St. Vincent, it's Brooklyn. It's from my time working in luxury and corporate fashion. It's something for everyone. I incorporated everyone that I love when I was making the product and which scent do you like. A lot of it has to do with my community, which I still strongly support to this day. And a lot of the products that I have created, it's customers that gave me the idea. So I had a bath salt and customers were like, we want sugar scrubs. And I was like, here's a sugar scrub. And then guys were like, what do you have for us? And I said, what do you want? And they're like, beards are big. And I'm like, okay, here's beard oil and beard balm. And the company just kept growing from that. So off of the 4 products I started with, every other product after that was customers coming to me like, I have a problem. How can you solve it?
That's amazing. And that's like a really great way to kind of like be involved and kind of create a community through your business. Now, we all know that starting a business can be very challenging. What were some of the challenges you faced in establishing Avalah and how did you overcome them?
When I first started Avalah, it was before COVID. So a lot of starting a small business was on Google. Nobody I knew was an entrepreneur. I didn't have any friends. My family thought I was crazy. And it was like failing upward. So it was like, yeah, I made a new step, but I'm still kind of like failing a little bit. A lot of learning, a lot of doing research on my own, finding other small businesses, the few that I could find to ask, like, how did you do it? Then, of course, COVID happened, and all of a sudden, everything's being advertised for helping small businesses and taking advantage of that. So you have, the Small Business Administration, you have the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, even like thinking outside the box and working and collaborating with other small businesses. It was constantly, and still is constantly, a learning experience because every day the mile marker, it changes. I was originally selling from my website, Then I started doing pop-ups, and now I sell to other small businesses. So I'm constantly learning and getting ideas from people who are blazing the path ahead of me.
Now, how do you see Avalah contributing to the empowerment of women, especially now that we are, in March celebrating Women's History Month?
Oh, I do everything for the girlies. Okay, I just came from a conference called In Her Bag, which was all about women empowerment, and I want to figure out how to collaborate with more businesses like that. Thursday, I'm working with the 15% Pledge to do an event at corporate headquarters. I love working with women. I feel like if anybody's gonna solve a problem, it's always gonna be like a lady. And then a lot of my products are because women don't take care of themselves enough. They always put other people ahead of themselves. And so usually when it comes to hiring, I love, collaborating with groups that are looking to place women or place mothers, because sometimes it's harder, and I have a flexible schedule. So it helps to I understand there's a need for flexibility when it comes to the way that your world works. But I'm always about inspiring and community and uplifting women. Most of the women in my life have inspired and uplifted me and got me to where I am today.
Now, how does your brand, emphasize or just prioritizes inclusivity and just celebrate unique beauty?
I think everybody has their own beauty journey. I've heard throughout the years problems other people have had in regards to oh, look at this pimple, or look at this stretch marks, and I really do feel like we are very hard on ourselves. The purpose of Avalah is to show you don't have to look like a magazine article in order to be comfortable, in order to feel beautiful, in order to wake up and be like, well, this is the bun that you're getting today. It is what it is. And so I don't judge anybody for their flaws. I always try to pick out I love your eyes, I love your smile. Everybody has something that's super beautiful and unique to them. And sometimes we just forget to embrace that. And so we have products for men, we have products for women. We love gay pride. We don't care. We really don't. Every single person is important to my company, to me, and just helping them to find that little piece of beauty. My smile, oh, I always hated my smile. And it's I don't know why. What you really think about yourself is important, and just somebody else recognizing it in you too is important.
Now, not only does your brand just prioritize natural beauty, there's also emphasis on natural ingredients. Can you tell us a little bit more about that journey?
So when I was in corporate America, I got my first little paycheck and I took it to a big box brand, and I was buying the products and I was trying it, and I was like, oh my gosh, my skin doesn't feel the way it does when I was using my mom's stuff. And I was just like, but mom's stuff doesn't really smell good, because she did not scent her products. So you were really getting the shea butter of it all, which is a nice nutty scent, but you really don't want to wear it all day, every day. So it was really important for me at that time to sit there and be like, well, what can I do to still incorporate those natural ingredients, but give it a little bit of luxury, make someone feel special when they're using it. It was really important for me to take the knowledge I know of aloe vera, shea butter, jojoba oil, argan oil, Jamaican castor oil, all these things that I grew up with, and I actually took advantage of. I didn't realize a lot of people don't know about all these amazing ingredients. And I did research. I said I want it to be 100% Jamaican castor oil, 100% shea butter. I literally import it in, and I melt everything myself. I am there from the beginning of the process all the way to the end of the process, all the way to packaging. And it was really important for me to stay true to natural ingredients, because it's not as hard as people make it out to be. And for a lot of things that your body actually needs, you don't really need all the chemicals that a lot of big box brands put into their products.
Now, you talked about kind of having this luxurious feel to it. Avalah offers luxury products, but at an affordable price point. How do you balance the desire for quality and authenticity with the need to keep your products accessible to a wider audience?
Growing up, my mom was a single mom, so she had 2 kids, and she couldn't really afford high-end skincare products, but you really don't need it when you already are having a moisturized skin, hydrated skin. Keeping the price points to somewhere where my community can afford, because there are moisturizers that are $130, and especially the times that we have now where food is expensive, taking your kids out for a day is expensive. It was really important for me for it to be accessible to my community. The balance is every once in a while I have to buy in bulk, or I'll have to not give discounts on the website or not give a promo code. But a lot of my customers just enjoy and love the fact that they can purchase the products. They don't really give me a hard time with the price points. But if if something inflation is inflation, so if I have to raise it a dollar or two, it's like, sorry guys. But
Right.
for the most part, because it is really, it's quality, they don't mind. Our candles burn for like 120 plus hours, so it's like, I'm not gonna fight you if you raise it a dollar or two.
Now, I want to talk about pricing in the sense that, like, there's this idea that the more expensive something is, the better it is. You know, can you just talk about, in your experience, you talked about, you know, how your mom's stuff worked better than, you know, maybe some other things you've had. Can you just talk a little bit more to that misconception that, you know, especially in skincare, that it has to be pricey in order for it to work?
Yeah, I think that luxury is how it makes you feel. And I was trying to redefine what luxury means. So growing up, luxury was the Louis Vuitton, the Mercedes Benz. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't feel just as good in, and this is bad because I don't know cars that well, but in a different kind of car, or having a different kind of bag. Like even Telfar, like it changes what the definition of luxury is, especially since it wasn't really accessible to our community. So I just feel when it comes to luxury, it's more on how do you feel as opposed to I want to buy the highest price item, because I think that traps you into one thing: the highest price item is the best, and that's not always true. But also disregarding lower price products that could actually be really great for you.
Now, I want to talk about education. Education is often a key to empowerment. Does Avalah engage in any educational initiatives, whether through workshops, online resources, or other channels, to empower customers to make informed choices about beauty and wellness?
I feel like 75% of the time at pop-ups, I'm just educating people. It's like, oh, I didn't know sweet almond oil did that. I didn't know, what's shea butter. There are communities that don't know what shea butter is. The candles have a wooden wick. There are people who don't know what a wooden wick is. I spend a lot of time educating just the population of, or consumers of, this is what is in it and this is why it's good for you, and justifying it, especially as a small business. When you're a brand that people don't know, you have to honestly step up and educate more so that they know that you know what you're talking about. You didn't just throw stuff together in a bowl and put it in a jar and sell it to them. And then justify your price point. I also educate on the website and online on my Instagram and on my blog. I write articles that are telling people exactly, even if it's not a product that I have, but like what products are good for you, what yoga exercise. I did like a yoga series in December for the holidays, meditation, mindfulness, breathing, other ways of self-care besides just products. And then I also work with a great team at Yes Girls Create, and they teach young girls how to be empowered and inspired. So I went in and taught young girls how to make their own sugar scrub, and they did their own colors, their own fragrances, and they were running around like so excited. And I was like, you sure you want to mix that? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, oh, it actually came out way better than I thought it was going to come out. I was like, I have competition now with a 15-year-old. I also do candle making classes for teenagers. I teach Tuesdays and Thursdays at Uncommon High School in Brooklyn, and so teaching them how to make their own candles and sugar scrub twice a week for the course of the school year, and then they go and sell it. So also teaching them how to be entrepreneurs and empowered and starting from young. I always tell them, if I started when you started, I would have been a millionaire today.
Now, I love with these products, you can actually feel okay with like introducing them to children and to young people. And I think that's where, you know, I love makeup and I think that's fun too, but I think that's possibly where it differs, especially since it's natural. Can you talk about some of the benefits of choosing something that's a little bit more natural over maybe some things that we typically see on the market?
I always say you don't have to aim for perfection when it comes to being healthier. Be mindful of what goes in and out your body, but we're not all going to be perfect. Like I probably had Chinese food like last week. It's about making conscious choices that, okay, I did something on Thursday, Friday, let me switch it up and have like a salad. It's the same thing with skincare. Like there's no retinol in any of my products. If you feel like you want to use retinol, that's up to you. But these are the basics for you to like start a foundation for your skincare. And if you want to add into it, nobody's faulting you at that. I just think sometimes you need to have a balance when it comes to adding in chemicals or adding in additional products, and then realizing when it's okay to give your skin, your hair, your body a rest.
Now, I definitely want to take a moment to highlight at least one of the products that we have here on the table. So can you just maybe point out one that, sticks out the most to you, or there's a story behind it that you really love the process of creating?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I will tell you the story of, this is hard, the body butter. So the body butter, it has white shea butter, yellow shea butter, coconut oil, almond oil, and vitamin E. And then this one has sandalwood, bergamot, and vanilla. And I did not think it was going to turn out to be like the best, one of the best sellers, but people really love it because dry hands or eczema or psoriasis, and it really helps with like the itching or the irritation. Also, classic ended up being in my head when I started, I was like, women are gonna love all the floral scents. And it turns out the women really do love like more of a like masculine-y sandalwood scent. I created this product. It was one of my first products that I created. And I was like, I hate when I have shea butter and I'm so oily and like it doesn't like get into my skin. So I started playing around with it. Lo and behold, my customers love the body butter. And then come summertime, they were like, we love your body butter, but you know what? It's a little too thick for the summer. And they were like, do you have like a oil? And then I went and created the body oil. So it's always like a step up. And then after the body oil, I was like, you know what I love? I love a shimmer. So then I created a shimmer body oil.
Ooh,
and it just literally just keeps growing and growing and growing.
That's amazing. Well, do you have any advice, like we have about a minute left, towards, just women in business who want to step into the industry of beauty?
Just do it. Just do it. I even at the conference the other day, a lot of women they had so much power, and I could see how much power and creativity and inspiration that they have in them, but they were just like, I'm waiting to see. And I'm like, what are you waiting for? You've survived a pandemic, you've survived like a recession, you're surviving every day. It's really, you can really step out on yourself and just believe in yourself. I created Avalah with the money I was making from my corporate job. I'm like, just even if you put $100 to the side, even if you LLC, start your Instagram, start trademarking, like just start. And then don't necessarily always rely on your family and friends. Start looking to create a community within the space of entrepreneurship or art or wherever it is you're trying to go. But believe in yourself and just take that first step, because I never in a million years thought I'd be doing Avalah full time. I thought I'm going to do corporate, and this is going to be like the gap between generational wealth and and now it's my full time, and I'm not only helping my family, I'm helping others.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and, sharing a little bit of you, with our community. So I appreciate it so much. I love talking about skincare, and I think it's like just an amazing opportunity to just, have the Bronx learn a little bit more about something that's happening elsewhere in New York City. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
We've come to the end of our show today. We hope you enjoyed this week's discussion on the Bronx social justice and anti-violence forums. If you want to join the conversation and present your point of view, you can visit our social media at BronxNet TV. Join us next week as we continue to elevate the discussion and bring further awareness across the globe. I'm your host, Kibin. Take care.